So now with that, we'll have this struct. In order to then do these calculations and to derive the prices that include the tax, I then want to add a method to this struct, which, as you learned, is in general also just another function you add, which could be called process here, since we're dealing with a job that should be processed. But the special thing now is that we add such a receiver argument before the function name. This turns this function into a method. And here the receiver should be this job struct here. So I'll name it job and set the type to tax included price job. And with that, inside of this process method, we can now essentially perform this calculation. So we can copy that and paste that into this process method here. And then here, create a new result map with the make function. And I'm creating a map here because I plan on storing a map of results in tax included prices for this job here. So I'll create a map here where the keys should be strings because that is what we set up here when we created the struct. And where the values should be float64 values. So with that, we got this map here, which we'll eventually use to store it in this struct value. Now we need our calculation logic. And here we actually don't need the outer for loop because for one given job, we only have one tax rate. We don't have a list of tax rates here, instead it's just one. Therefore, we don't need that extra slice here either. Instead, we just need this for loop where we go through all the prices, though now, of course, we want to go through the input prices in our struct, so on this job struct. So here it's job.input prices. We want to loop through these values here. And then we want to store the results in our map. So we want to access the result map, and then we need to set a string key. And I mentioned before that I want to use the raw price, so to say, without tax as a key. So just price here. And then the value should of course be such a float value, though the tax rate is now stored in the job. Now here results should be created with the := operator. And if we do that, we should now also get an error here, of course, because price is a float64 value, but we want a string key. Therefore, we must convert this to a string, and we can get such a string here by using the format package again, and then there the sprint functions. sprintf, for example, returns a new string, which will then be used as a key here, based on the string we pass to sprintf. And here I want to use this special syntax about which you learned to output a float number that has at most 2 decimal places. And as a second argument to sprintf, I'll use the price as a number that should be used in here. So that will set the price as a key on this result map, and then the price with the tax applied to it as a value for that key. Therefore, we don't need that line anymore, and we are also not using the price index anymore, so we can replace that with an underscore. And once we do all that, we have the basic logic now encapsulated in such a process method. And therefore, we can now go back to the main function and now get rid of everything except for this tax rates for loop here, to now go through all the tax rates, and for every tax rate, I now want to create such a job and then process it. And of course, I want to create these jobs with the new tax included price job function. So, therefore, we must import our own package, and hence I'll wrap all these imports here with parentheses, and then import example.com, which I'm using in my path here, /price calculator in my case. You, of course, should use whatever you chose as a path for your module. So for me, it's this path, and then /prices. This includes my own prices package, and that then allows me, inside of that for loop, to use this prices package to access the exposed functions. Now, since I also have a variable named prices here, I have some problems at the moment, so we should get rid of that. And with that gone, now we can call new tax included price job to call this constructor function. And it needs a tax rate as an input, which is no problem because that's what we have here in this loop. So I pass it to that. And I'll get back my price job as a value. To be precise, I'll get back a pointer at the created job. But then we can use this pointer to call process. And with that, we're then triggering this process method here. So now I just want to make sure that we also see something at the end once we're done. And therefore, instead of outputting something here, which we don't need, and we therefore also don't need the result variable here, we can get rid of that and get rid of the format import here. So instead of doing that here in the main function, I'll go to the prices.go file, and in there, after this for loop, where we calculated the prices for one given tax rate, I want to use this format package to output this result map here. And of course, later we'll write these results to a file. For the moment, I'll use this approach. Therefore, now if we run this application, we should get a bunch of maps here, one for each tax rate with the prices that belong to this tax rate. And to be precise, we should always get a key that is the raw price without tax applied to it. And then thereafter the price with tax added to it. And the key is formatted like this, with these 2 decimal places being shown here, because that is what I chose here in my code. And of course, as mentioned before, you can absolutely tweak that code, play around with it, and simply try things on your own, because the main purpose of this section, of course, is to give you a good exercise that does allow you to practice what you learned.